All right, welcome to another episode of the Hyperformance podcast. I'm joined as always by one of my loyal co-hosts. Not that Matt Harvey's not loyal, his services weren't required for this episode because we've got someone filling in the third slot. 4 mics just starts to get a bit unnecessary, especially because I'm shit at delegating the mic. So shout out to Jacob, but also welcome back to the show, Tendon King, Jake Tuura.
Thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, really good. When was the last time you were on? No, there's no point digging that up. It was over a year ago, so might have been a lifetime ago. And I know you've talked about this on a couple of podcasts because I listened to most of your podcast appearances, but we've got a bit of a unique audience, so I think they'd be sort of curious. Talk about this lat saga, because it's been going on for a fucking while now. Sorry if this is frustrating and triggering for you talking about, but yeah, can you tell us how did this injury happen, and then talk about what sort of unfolded since?
Yeah, it has nothing. The issues have nothing to do with the tendon. It's just that it's an armpit incision. They could have just went through the front and so like I tore my lat tendon last spring, which is like 10 months ago, doing a trap bar deadlift, like 545 pounds.
Just quickly before you go on, do you think about your lats in the starting position, or do you just tug?
Depends on the day. Usually I just pick it up. Yeah, I mean, usually, like, it's just my nature, you know. I just go in and jerk it off the ground. And I've done the most I've ever done is 695 on a trap bar, like not one of those rogue trap bars either, where it's like super elevated, like a normal trap bar, you know. So it's like 695. I haven't done that in a long time, so like my max was probably around 600, maybe 650 at the time I did tear it. So I was just warming up, and it just popped, and I didn't think it was anything. I was just like, I just went to the bathroom and I was kind of pissed. I'm like, okay, that hurt. I could raise it overhead. I didn't have any like bruising, anything like that.
But it was so bad. Like you immediately didn't do another rep. You're like, something's happened, or was it like, oh, let me?
I didn't even get the rep. I like budged it. I think I budged it a little bit off the ground, and then it just popped. And then I'm like, okay. And for me to pick anything up off the ground, I felt like right away that it was painful. So I was just done with the session, and then I gave it probably a few days. I didn't think it was anything. I posted it online, and my Clifton Harsky, I don't know if you guys know Clifton Harsky, he reached out. He was like, I'm pretty sure you tore your lat tendon, because he had done his. So he told me to go in, and I went. I never go to the doctor, but like I went in to the doctor, went to an orthopedic, and she did a bunch of muscle tests, and she's like, yeah, I'm like 90% sure that you're fine. And I was like, okay, but I used to work like college athletics, and that's what they'd say whenever athletes went down with an ACL tear. They
was she doing like manual isometrics, like push down into my arm, or like
stuff like that? Yeah. Where it's like, I mean, the body is so redundant that anyone who has a significant amount of muscle mass, you're not going to be able to like know.
You hadn't felt that power before.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm going to be able to compensate. So, anyways, I went to get an ultrasound, like the next day, I think, and the guy's like, yeah, this is completely tore. So yeah, then we decided to get surgery. You had to get surgery pretty quick, otherwise it starts to retract and attach to the skin, and it's gonna be hard to grab. So got surgery like pretty quick after that, and everything went well. And then like 2 months later, my armpit incision like wasn't closing, and it just bursted open. And then they went in, cleaned it up. Then like a few months later, did the same thing, bursted open again. And so I actually had now 4 extra surgeries for the armpit incision because it keeps bursting open, and they don't see anything in there. It just, for some reason, wants to keep opening. But at this point, I mean, you love Nassim Taleb. I'm kind of halfway through the Black Swan right now, and he was
that was a Black Swan event.
No. That was okay. Yeah. Yes. But
so maybe really, maybe you don't. Maybe you have a higher threshold. Like your whole body has to combust to be a Black Swan.
Well, what I was getting at was like he had a section about the statistics versus maybe like stories. Like statistics don't really hit home for us, but if you can tell a story, it will hit home and like maybe get that emotional response. So like for me, I haven't really. I've been calling it an abscess, a skin abscess. I don't think that's the necessary terminology, because it's not like leaking out pus and all this nasty stuff, but it's basically like that. It's hard to research, hard to figure out what's going on. You think you're going to get sepsis if you Google it too much. So my mom was telling me there's a farmer that lives next to us. He had his appendix removed back in the day, and it did the same thing. His skin bursted open. for like a year, but he never went in because he was a farmer. And then at some point, a staple had popped out, so he got staple removed, and then he went in, and then another staple came out like a couple months later, and at that point, it had healed. It had healed itself. So I'm like, this is the Nassim Taleb thing where I'm like, I can do all the objective, logical thinking, but if you tell me the story of this farmer that had that experience, now I can't stop thinking about that. So for me, I'm like, I've had 4 surgeries. I'm done with you guys. If this thing bursts open again, I'm just going to let it heal. And if that means I have to dunk basketballs and play basketball with my armpit leaking yellow fluid, I'm just going to put enough gauze on it to absorb it. But I'm just going to let it heal by itself.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that we pride ourselves, especially as like manly men, on like logic and facts, and yet where we all come back to at the end of the day is just manifestation, like a stereotypical like young person who has a lot of like dream catchers hung up on their roof and shit like that. But I guess that's the science.
I know, dude. I try to be objective, and I just know that I'm so irrational. I've always been that way, and it's human to be irrational. Why you're fighting yourself if you're going to be the robot objective guy? Like I try to do all the research and objective critical thinking I can, but like also it's limiting. It's very limiting, and that doesn't really. No one really connects to that. Like, for example, if I gave all my patellar tendon wisdom in a very objective, scientific way, I would have no people liking me. I would have no people getting any results from what I say. I have to put some artful creativity into it. That's specific to me, and at the end of the day, you just want results. So I get better results than the person that might have better objective knowledge of the patellar tendon. That's what I believe.
You're speaking to my soul right now when it comes to like the delivery of information, because this is something where I've criticized a lot of the evidence-based community in the way that they communicate online, just dropping the facts and logic, but not having any ability to like wrap people up in a story and like accepting that as a necessary part of effective communication.
Dude, you know who put it the best recently, and was Grant Fowler. Grant Fowler has said it. He's said it so good. I mean, I don't talk to him. We used back in the day, we did a podcast, but like we haven't communicated in a long time. But he was talking about that the really charlatan, artful person, like maybe Dave Asprey, is on one side of the coin, and then the other side of the coin is like Lane Norton, how he debunks everything and is like it has to be supported by science. It's like you guys are the same.
Yeah, is the more emotional man because he's suppressing it. Like you see the emotions erupt out of him whenever he gets challenged because he refuses to use any up in the story.
Yeah. They're the same. It's the same. Like, yeah. The people. It's like obviously Dave Asprey has clear objective flaws with what he says. But then it's like if you go pure objective, I'm like, that's just as flawed. It is just as flawed as the Asprey argument. So I'm like, there has to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I haven't. It's like the analogy of same. Two sides of the same coin. I just loved it. And I'm like, I think what I'm trying to do is let's stand the coin on its end. And I want to be there. That's where I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. The duality of man. I thought that this was a nice sort of segue into taking personal medical responsibility, because I'm sure you've communicated with a lot of people in your DMs who've developed jumper's knee and gone to the doctor, and then they're reaching out to some guy just on Instagram. And that already shows like an understanding of them, that it's like, even though the doctor is at the tip of the spear in terms of qualifications and stuff like that, it's just, if you just go there and you take no responsibility. And I think a lot of people, when they enter the medical system, like they are just looking to do that, just handball the problem to someone else, lay spread eagle on the table and be like, fix me. What are your sort of thoughts on navigating that process? Because like we're coaches, we're already sort of 1 foot in this rabbit hole, but I know you do a lot of like working with athletes directly who know sweet fuck all about training. Other than maybe they've been through your content, they've done some hypertrophy clusters. Do you have any advice for especially younger people who might not have the confidence to ignore that level of authority from a doc when they are dealing with a sports injury?
Okay, so like
because there's a sweet spot. You don't want to be like, oh, what is a doctor like?
Yeah. That goes back to my subjective experience of like, it was so poor. I went through like 2 years of the medical route with patellar tendinopathy, and like it did nothing. 2 years, I had no results. I could not get back to basketball. But I think if it works, that's not most people. Most people will go in, they get diagnosed patellar tendinopathy, they tell them the rest of it, they're fine. They're going to get better because tendons will heal. But they're the people that come to me, or the people that want to buy my program or get a consultation. Those are the ones who've had it for months, and that the doctor route hasn't worked. So it's like you've kind of checked that box, that or not.
Natural history is not doing its job.
Yeah, you went that route and it didn't work. So it's like you got to do a bit more, and you can't blame like the medical system or PTs. Like they have not specialized in patellar tendon rehab or even tendon rehab. Especially for like athletes who want to play basketball, dunk basketballs, do the highest stress that they can to the patellar tendon. I think that requires someone, well, maybe it doesn't, but I think you got to understand that that's going to take a different rehab than like some 60-year-old lady who has patellofemoral pain. As far as what advice would I have for a kid that like just wants to get fixed and like lay there? That's tough. I have not thought about that. I'm like, to put myself in those shoes.
No, it is just to figure it. Sometimes it is a life.
Because I think I've done that a bit with my lat tendon. Like I don't know anything about the skin bursting out. I don't know anything about that. And I basically go into the doctor's help list and I'm like, I try to do research, but I can't. There's nothing really useful that I found. Versus when it's a patellar tendon pain, you can go on Google and you can find. Nowadays, 10 years ago, you couldn't. 10 years ago, I found Kelly couch stretch, and I had researched like endlessly. There was nothing. Nowadays, there's thousands of hours of podcasts and videos you can watch on patellar tendon rehab. Versus my thing, I'm pretty much outsourcing my own intuition and everything to the doctors, and I'm kind of reached a limit where I'm like, this ain't working. I don't want to get go under for another surgery, another course of antibiotics, many months having stitches in my arm. Let's just see let's try the natural course. Whether that could take many months, I don't know, but that's a tough thing because I think that really goes on who you are as a person. Like for me, when I was younger, I speak so poorly of the neurotic people, but I was the neurotic person back when I went through patellar tendon in the first place. Neurotic about everything. I was afraid to load. I thought my biomechanics were messed up. My ankles were stiff. I needed to work on all of these little things that I'm like, nowadays, if someone came to me with that, I'd be like, no, you don't need to focus on any of that. How about you work on the elephant in the room, which is your quadricep is super small and weak. And you have no hopping ability on that one side, like let's work on the elephants in the room, because if you improve your function with your existing patellar tendon pain, as the function improves, the pain is usually delayed and the pain will slowly get better as well. It's just, maybe it's not common sense, because the common sense back in the day was like, I just need to rest it. And
society tells us as well that if you're in pain, that the rest of your life doesn't matter. Whereas I feel like people like you, and especially a lot of the evidence-based rehab community, their big focus, because again, the body of evidence isn't that promising. I think people have shifted their focus to exactly what you're saying. Like, we hope this pain reduces in the long term, but like, if we can get your function back, isn't that the thing that you ultimately care about most? Like, why is pain, other than it's like, ow, but pain is so much more than that experience in the immediate. It's also, again, the stories you're attaching to it, you thinking about your future, like, how does this affect me in the long run? Yeah. Am I ever going to hoop pain-free again? And
David Gray recently had a show about that, about if you the biopsychosocial, and you go like the psychosocial element and how we can hone in on that. But if you look at the bio element, you put someone on an isometric and they feel better. Now you could have cleared up everything, you could have made everything better. And I think the same with, I think this is the benefit with patellar tendon. Like, take patellar tendon versus patellofemoral is, in general, the patellar tendon is going to be people who like biologically have a weaker quad. Biologically, they have clear functional deficits. Versus patellofemoral, these people will get like a head case because they have knee pain anytime they bend their knee, they have knee pain. So I think Enda King, I did a podcast with Enda King a couple years ago. He said it perfectly. He was like, he thinks that the patellar tendon is more about the bio side. Like, let's just work on the function and then it'll clear up everything else, versus the patellofemoral can start to drift more towards the psychosocial elements, because those people have like pain all day with everything they do. Versus the patellar tendon, it hurts when you jump. I guess it hurts when you sit sometimes, when you stand for long periods of time, but it's like, it's pretty much related to the bio element of just when you load it. Versus when you have patellofemoral, it hurts all the time. And you can't blame a person for getting like stuck in their head about it, you know?
That's interesting to me because I know that there's a lot of people for varying musculoskeletal conditions downplaying, and I think I see where they're coming from. The importance of diagnosis for a variety of conditions, not really talking about like knee pain or jumper's knee or distinguishing between patellofemoral and stuff like that. So it is sort of interesting hearing the important, there is potentially some importance to getting an accurate diagnosis, especially for tendons and knee health.
Yeah.
I think it's more the non-specific lower back pain stuff where people are like, don't bother getting scans on that. But so maybe for the knee, it is worth pursuing that path of like really nailing down a diagnosis.
Dude, someone had a great infographic recently. It was like they highlighted the low back and they were like non-specific, just general rehab. But then when you get to the knee, it's not as much like that. When you get to the Achilles, it is like completely about specific diagnosis for the Achilles. And they were kind of thinking of like, is this because of like what was the rationale? I think one of the rationales was like, is the low back like that because it houses the spinal cord and like you get these crazy compensations because of that, versus as you go further down the joint, it's like if you got an Achilles, like there are other things you can get at the Achilles, but it's like it's going to be you can be pretty specific with the diagnosis down there.
So we're going to refer up your leg the whole way, like the back will go all the way down to your leg.
Or something along those lines. And then I think the knee was kind of in the middle where it's like for basically any knee issue, if you just do graded loading, you're gonna get better. You don't really need to know exactly what it is. I just like to confirm patellar tendon. This just makes it so much easier because I'm like, you're probably going to experience XYZ, and then if you have patellofemoral, you're probably going to experience XYZ.
Also, it's not so much about the rehab; it's more about like what the outcome is at the end and the path.
Or like managing expectations.
It's probably managing the expectations of like, or maybe for me when I do the conversations with people is like, when you talk to someone and they kind of know what you're going to say already, like your story. Maybe people feel heard, quote unquote heard, because it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly. You sat in a plane and your patellar tendon hurt the whole 3-hour flight. Oh, exactly. That's part of patellar tendon. And maybe up to that point, they're like, no one has ever understood this before. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, the trust would just be way.
Yeah. Sure. So it's like, you'd hate to go to a medical professional and tell them your story. And they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You'd like
That's
for them
the
to be
worst
like,
one I've ever seen.
Yeah. You'd like for them to be like, oh yeah, I've seen this all the time. And I know exactly what I'm doing. Like just giving them, I guess it just gives them confidence and your own competence to get them better. Yeah. The low back, that's really something I'm still trying to wrap my head around of like, that is the kind of the thing, non-specific low back pain. Who cares what it is? Let's try the rehab. And a lot of people are going to get better, but then as you go down further, it's like, you can get very specific. And as far as what does that mean outcome wise? And I guess, I don't know, like loading good rehab is good rehab.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about like linking back to the natural history conversation, like pans out really well for some people, doesn't pan out so well for others. I think maybe you've talked about this in terms of a reactive tendon and then a degenerative tendon. Are there any time frames that you can give to people? I realize it might be a bit vague where it's like, okay, so you've just experienced your first onset of knee pain. How long are we willing to let that go on for before we're like, oh, this may be a degenerative tendon, or this may be a situation where natural history isn't going to help me? Or is it that, no, you don't know when it could happen? Or is there a time frame where the focus needs to shift?
Yeah. I think anyone, so I guess the two categories I'd put it in are like, maybe this story will help. My nephew, he just went into middle school and I go, whatever, play catch with him. And he knows I do a bunch of stuff on jumper's knee. So he comes, he's like, I think I have jumper's knee. What should I do? He's limping around and everything. And I'm like, this is what, I'm like, for someone like you, first of all, you're not going to get a tendon pain for a kid like that. You're going to get like a, what do they call it? Apophysitis, how like at the junction where the tendon meets the bone is the weak area. So you have like the growth. Once the growth plate goes away, now the weak point is the tendon, not the apophysitis anymore. So that's where they get Osgood-Schlatter, or they get Sinding Larsen-Johansson, or at the Achilles, they get Sever's disease, the young adolescent kids. So as they mature and then they still have that tendon pain, then you'd be like, okay, that's just run of the mill tendon pain. But when they're a kid, it's a little different. So for him, I was like, he's like, what should I do? And I was like, come on, you're like, whatever, age 14, I don't know. And I'm like, this is what we do, what we call the wait and see approach. We just wait and see. And then I think a week later, I went out. He likes Pokemon, so I was buying Pokemon cards. And I was like, we played hockey. And I'm like, how's your knee? And he's like, oh, it's better. And I'm like, exactly. Like, you're a young kid. You don't need anything special. It's the wait and see approach is beautiful for that group. Now, it might be different if he's competing in a competitive sport and he has pressure and he's consistently provoking his pain. But usually it's like, it's just going to go away. So I think the reactive is a little bit like that, how like someone has just come in with their first bout of tendon pain. And I'm going to probably treat it the same way. I'll go natural history, be like, have you ever had this pain before? I'll be like, no. And I'd be like, well, then just take it easier for a few days, just try to not provoke it anymore. And I bet you it'll heal pretty quick. And that's usually what happens. Like a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. And they feel better. If the thing is, you come in, your tendon's blown up, and it's like you have a natural history of many months of this thing, maybe in the past, maybe in years past, or even you've had it for many months. I'm like, that's the rest thing. I don't think that's going to do much anymore. Because at that point, I think you've had so much time to lose function. Like your quad has probably got smaller. It's probably got weaker. Your hopping ability on that side is probably significantly decreased. And I think you need to work on those function. You need to work on the function of those things, and the pain will slowly go away. Versus the reactive person, they might have a weaker quad and they might have worse hopping ability. But if you just offload the tendon a bit, the pain goes down, the function improves. Yeah. So it's like a flip. I think it's a flip. How like we so often with the chronic cases are like, let's just do good rehab, build the function up, the pain will go away. But I'm like, what if you flipped it and you're like, let's get the pain to settle, and then the function comes back. And I think that's a acute versus chronic case. If it's acute, just get the pain to go away and the function comes back to where it was. If it's chronic, work on the function, because the function has been down for a long period of time. You know what I'm saying? I think it's like a flip.
Do you have tips for maintaining loading and working on function without aggravating the tendon, or is that a very personal thing? Or are there some general couple of vertical shin split squats? Someone who's dealt with tendon pain for a very long time is like, you got to be in the gym every week. You just have to for the rest of your life. Probably you have to, if you want to compete. For me, like play basketball or do anything athletic, you have to be in the gym because you have to keep your muscles super strong. And every time you do a gym session, you're just reinforcing that you don't have significant weaknesses side to side. You're just reinforcing that your brain is not inhibiting one side due to pain. Your muscles are not significantly weaker or smaller. Every time you hit the gym, you're just confirming that you have good strength and you have good connection with those muscles. So that's really protective for a tendon. Just make sure you're hitting the gym and staying up on the strength of those limbs. The other thing with the I think you got to manage the loads, which that is very individual. And it also gets very difficult when you talk about competitive versus non-competitive, because a lot of the Achilles researchers work with joggers, people who just jog, and they try to keep them jogging. If it's not too bad of pain, they try to keep them jogging. They try to keep their activity level as high as possible. They try to keep them jogging. They don't want to say remove jogging, only do calf raises. They don't want to do that. They're like, let's keep doing the jogging and do some rehab on the side. Versus for me, I work with basketball players, and you don't know how to hold yourself back when you play basketball. You always play at 100%. So there's no one decides how hard to play when there's like an open moment.
So it's like when you I think you have to distinguish competitive versus non-competitive. Like if you're just going around and shooting jumpers, like with all the basketball players that come to me with patellar tendon, I am completely fine with them going and taking shots without like doing it on the move. Because even if you're doing it on the move alone, you usually go super hard. If you're just standing there and doing some low level jumps, shooting the ball, doing free throws, it's completely fine. But if you want to hop into a pickup game, that's going to be a different story, because now you're going to go 100%. And it's like, that's the thing that's going to bite you. I think all you have to do is look at next day pain, because the next day pain will always tell you. If you did too much today, you wake up tomorrow, your tendon's blown up. That's how you know it was too much. Like, it's so simple. Sometimes it's not next day pain. It's 2 days later. That's kind of rare, because I think probably if it was like
people with slow metabolisms.
I don't know what it is. Like, I've had that before. I had that with my Achilles. How like I overloaded it one day because I had so much time off. I did a few dunks, and the next morning I felt fine. And then the following morning I couldn't even walk down the stairs. like I had a reactive blown up tendon. I gave it like a week of taking it easy, and it completely resolved itself. So yeah, I think when we talk about the people that how much is too much, I think it is very individual. But if you just use next day pain, the tendon is always going to tell you. It's so easy. Tendon rehab is difficult because it can take many months or many years, and you kind of you think you have it managed, and then like you do too much one day, and then it comes back, and you're thinking, do I need to go back to square one? And it's like, no, don't panic. But the best thing is it tells you every day. Every day you get out of bed in the morning, your patellar tendon will be painful or stiff. Your Achilles will be painful or stiff, and you just need to tie that into what you did yesterday. And then, if it is more painful and stiff, like too much, you just decrease what you did, or give it a little bit more rest, let it recover. Like you just want to keep the pain stable without getting those like blow-ups of pain. Like it makes it very simple because it just it'll tell you every morning.
Yeah. Speaking of simplicity and segueing us partially out of rehab, trying to shift towards an S&C focus for the conversation, I saw you share the Greg Lemmon post that had both physiotherapists and S&C coaches tearing their hair out. And I think you're someone who sort of, you go down rabbit holes, but then you also try to bring it back to simple and pragmatic implementation. One, why did you like that post, and like, do you have any sort of commentary on?
So it was his post saying reaction? It was his post saying that strength and conditioning is simple.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah.
Like 100%, and it is. It's so simple. Like how many years does it take you to get your head wrapped around strength conditioning principles? Like maybe for us is like you kind of need to trial and error it. You know, you need to see for yourself with yourself or with people like. How hard is it to make someone like bigger, stronger, faster? Like maybe that does take many years, but it's like, that's just, you could have, if you didn't need to go through the experience, you could have read that in a book and like understood the concepts fairly quickly, and you wouldn't need to. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's probably an insecurity on the strength coach world, the strength coach part of like, that's a pretty offensive thing to say that your field is simple and you could learn these things. Yeah.
Do you think it's worth though, so like young coaches like left me or someone like that going through these rabbit holes and coming back out? Do you think there's any value in that experience of deep diving into these topics, or you just think just read the textbook, man? Or
I can only speak for myself, and I'm unlike many of the strength coaches I meet, which is why I don't get along with them. Well, I do get along with most people, but I'm like, don't see eye to eye. And for me, there's no one would ever have told me, hey buddy, strength conditioning is simple. In my first year, it's simple. You don't need to like don't overcomplicate things, man. I'm like, no, screw you. I'm going to overcomplicate things for a decade, and then I'm going to come out and see for myself. I need to see for myself. I need to see it for myself. So if you're someone that needs to see it for themselves, then go and read every strength conditioning book there is and go and train athletes for a decade with all the quote unquote advanced concepts. And probably after 10 years, you're going to be like, I could have just done starting strength or something, and I would have probably got similar results, you know? And I'm like, I just think it's probably like an existential thing. It was for me of like, I just need to be engaged with something. I need to be entertained with something. So that's, if I'm going to repeat starting strength for a decade, I don't have that in me. I get bored. But I think a lot of strength coaches, like, it is monotonous. And if you have the personality of being able to deal with monotony and deal with boredom, then you probably can do that just fine. I just never could do it just fine. I needed to go. So I think that's where I've gravitated towards patellar and Achilles tendon, because like it is so engaging. I think about it all day, and there's 1,000 different avenues that are like contradictory, and I'm trying to sort them out in my head and have conversation with people. So I'm like, that's a fun thing for me versus like Joel Smith really put this in my head when I talked to him last summer. He was like, he remembered going to, I think it was like sitting in offices with strength coaches and just being bored with their arguments, being bored with their conversations. And I was like, I finally clicked with me. I was like, I always thought I had a problem. I was walking around the weight rooms with other strength coaches feeling like I'm just the arrogant young guy. And like, I don't care about the close grip bench and the regular grip bench. Like, it doesn't matter, man. I had a hard time. Like the tiers, like I think that one experience with like the tier system, Joe Ken, the tier system, like some of the guys I worked, I don't know if you guys, it's like an American football guy. He works with the Carolina Panthers. He wrote a book called The Tier System, just a way to structure workouts during the week. And And I would just be in offices with guys talking about the tier system, how to change exercises based on this template and stuff. And I'm like, just bored. I'm just so bored. Like, this is not mentally, this is not stimulating for me. Yeah. So I enjoyed that by Greg. That was just spot on of like, strength and conditioning concepts are not that hard. Yeah, it was hilarious. It was hilarious. And the ones who got offended, they got offended because it was correct. They got offended because deep down they know that was right.
The only criticism, and it's coming from physios, and I kind of see where they're coming from. I think their argument is most physios also don't understand the basics of S&C.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I could see that.
But for S&C coaches, I think it was a more important message for us to hear. Whereas there's so many physios, I'm like, oh no, like it can be simple, but like you do need to fucking train to work it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I have a hard time with that even to this day. Like having 10 conversations, I just assume people know. Like I get on a consult and they'll be like, I'll be like, yeah, loading is good if you're 10, and they'll be like, what? Loading is? And I'm like, oh my, are you kidding me? Like, all right, I'm gonna need to backpedal like to the very beginning and like, but I just assume people know. It's one of my problems. I just assume people have their head on straight with things. I assume physios kind of understand the very basics of strength conditioning, and if they don't, I probably just naturally gravitate away from them. You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just fascinating how you couldn't understand the basics to me. Fascinating how you could. Yeah.
Something that I've had the pleasure of watching is at least my perception of like you and Mike Boyle having a little bit of a friendship that's sort of been.
I'm going to speak at his thing in a couple weeks here, his seminar.
Because I think he shares some of like your frustrations about just like the ego of young strength coaches. He's always getting. I mean, I've taken shots at Mike Boyle as well, and like, but I've always maintained this perspective, and I've made a meme about just young coaches tearing their hair out over Mike Boyle disagreeing with them. But I'm like, how do you expect a 60-something-year-old strength coach to behave and react to some young dude who hasn't done shit compared to him? Like, logically, why would he open himself up to listening to you? Because if he listens to you, he's also got to listen to the other 50,000 people in his comment section. So yeah, it's just, can you speak to like your perception of him as a coach, or like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, our relationship started because I did a Jill Cook podcast. And he listened to the Jill Cook podcast about patellofemoral pain versus patellar tendinopathy. And he just loved it. He shared it a bunch. Like I got a ton of followers on my social media, on my Instagram because of that. And then I would post things about like knees over toes, like not being that good even for patellar tendon, because it doesn't matter to stimulate the patellar tendon or strengthen the quads. It doesn't matter. And then for patellofemoral pain, the deeper you get into knee flexion, the more likely you are to provoke patellofemoral pain. And depending on the muscle
as much.
Yeah. It's just, I think, well, the thing with patellofemoral pain, I think it's just a pressure thing at the kneecap. And the deeper you go, the more pressure you probably experience at the kneecap, because the back of the kneecap kind of has that ridge, and it just parts of it rub on the condyles a little differently based on your level of knee flexion. It's hard though, because a lot of the knee flexion research is like they don't actually even go that deep, and they do it with maybe just different exercises. But that concept is kind of there. Patellofemoral pain is still kind of a mystery. Like, what is even causing the pain? You know, what is it? But it's depending on the way you want to rehab someone. I'm kind of the camp of like, let's try to avoid really on maybe high pressure, sensation wise, high pressure in your patellofemoral joints. Let's just stay out of that and just try to strengthen the surrounding muscles. You know, try to strengthen the musculature around the knee. Some people probably want to push into pain more than others. It depends on the person. But so anyways, yeah, Mike kind of took that, and it just probably confirmed what he's been doing for many years. And yeah, I think we go back to what I said earlier of like how irrational I know that I am, and I'm just an irrational dude. So I'm like, if I see something from Mike that might be a little bit irrational, I'm like, that's just Mike. It's just how he is. And, you know, and I have my own ways of like looking at things, but I'm like, he's taken a liking to me. So I'm like, I like the dude. I think there is a lot of truth to what he says with, when you get to like the pain, he talks a lot about those pain research guys, like the fresh out of PT school guys who are like, what is Mike's thing? He says how you damage the joint over time. What does he say with that? what's that phrase?
Orthopedic cost.
Orthopedic costs, yeah. And he's like, all the ones who coming at him for orthopedic costs are the young guys fresh out of PT school. And I think this is the thing of like, let's take phenomenology or just the experience. If these guys were 60 years old, they wouldn't have the views they do being 20-year-olds. Because for some, like, you know what I'm saying? Like your body just breaks down over time. That's just what happens. And I don't know why you have this infantile thought that like, no, the body is resilient, the body is fine. And I'm like, I mean, I definitely do think that. Clearly do think that, but I also think the other side is true. Like if why did I blow my lat tendon? Why did I tear my lat tendon? Just out of nowhere. Like I thought that I had no pain. I thought that the body was robust.
It wasn't a spike in load. Like
yeah. Like why did it happen? So it's like, I mean, and even look at patellar tendon and jumpers knee is like the best jumpers in the world who've jumped their entire life. They're going to have the worst looking patellar tendon. They're going to have the most pathology with their tendon. They would have not got that had they not jumped their whole life. There's an orthopedic cost right there. So I think there is a lot of truth that maybe they've taken it to say like it's causing fragility or it's causing fear in people's minds. And people have probably come at me for having some things like that too. And I'm like, I'm just like, good. I don't care. I don't care what I've created in people's minds. Like that's their thing to deal with. I'm not working with them one-on-one to get rid of their fear of exercise. I don't do too much of that, but I'm like, there's truth to both sides. And
I think the nocebo has become a bit of a meme now where it's like, we genuinely did have a problem where like people are like, no, if your spine flexes even a little bit, all your jellies are going to shoot out. But then there's now this other side where if you sort of bring up this or propose that anything could have a potential negative effect on your system, you're noceboing people. And we joke about it all the time. Like, nocebo.
Oh my God. It's so true. It's like, it's the, what do they say? History is circular, right? That at one point it's like, you can move in any way you want. Every way is healthy. And it's like, well, not completely. Somewhere in the middle is probably true. Like, if you think that, then why did we get people blowing their Achilles? You know, why are they blowing their Achilles on movements that look harmless? Like, we're supposed to be robust and resilient. Well, then explain that. You know, there are periods where we are fragile and we break something.
Like that NFL guy on the Super Bowl, just snapping that shit.
I know. And then the thing is, you look at like, I've kind of dug into it a bit because like I know a few guys like NFL dig into like the reason why, and then you piece in all the maybe like situations he was in with like the playing surface and everything, and that maybe the training loads and stuff like end of the year and
artificial turf, or something like that.
You talk about all that, but then you're like, how many guys on the roster? Like 52 or something. Like, why did the other 51 guys not blow their Achilles too? Like, you know, why just this guy? So it's like
their system craves the artificial turf.
I don't know. It's like you give that you just say it just happens, you know, things just happen sometimes. And I do say that, but I'm like, I kind of want to dig into why. I enjoy digging into why, because life is boring if I don't try to dig into why. And I'll never find it. I'll probably never find it.
Something that I'm curious to get your opinion on or your thoughts on is I think originally the discussion, at least what I was hearing, is that plyometric and strength training had different effects on tendon adaptations. And then sort of what I've been hearing more recently is that like, strength training makes a tendon stiffer. Plyometric training, the only difference with plyometric training is that you're training the coordination of the whole musculotendon unit. So like isometric contraction of the muscles, I guess, to deform the tendon. Like you're just practicing that. But in terms of the adaptation of the tendon, just either fast shit or slow shit makes it stiffer. But then I saw one of your posts about the different sorts of elongation that you get from plyometric training versus strength training. What are your thoughts on tendon adaptations from plyometric versus strength training?
Which post was it? The last part you said, which post was I? I'm trying
to. It was the one where you were talking about strength training elongates the fascicles. It changes the layout of the different compartments of the tendon, whereas strength training, I think, just sort of stretching the whole thing out.
Was that on the viscoelastic one?
Yeah,
a real. Yeah, I was like, I've been trying to wrap my head around the viscoelastic response of of tendon. You can get it with different structures. Like one of them, wood is a good one. Like they do viscoelastic responses with wood. They just like put weights on wood and see that it's elastic and it comes back. And then if you do it for a very long time, it can get viscous. Like some of these old buildings, the wood has a viscous property because it's actually deformed and warped a little bit. Elastic just means that it deforms and returns to its original shape. So like, you know, this people, when people talk about elasticity, it's like, are we talking about like elasticity as a function? Because that just means everything you've ever done is elastic because you've returned to your original shape. Everything. But then I'm like, are you talking about the structure? Right. Yeah, you know, are you talking about the structural properties? Because then maybe it is a bit different. So like some of the terms are a bit difficult. Even like stiffness is like when you pull on it, it only deforms so much if it's very stiff. But if it's not as stiff, it'll deform much more. And then, you know, people would get to like tendon compliance and it's like, I want more tendon compliance. And I'm like, I just don't know. It's such a mess. All those things are such a mess. And I'm like, I don't think you're making a big difference on any of those things. I think the body is just like, the body's tendon is the way that it is. And you're going to see a stiffness gain over many months and many years of doing some certain activity. Like, I don't think you're going to see it in a day or a week of a certain type of training. So anyways, when we talk about, the plyometric versus strength training and stiffness, I think the first problem with the stiffness stuff is, how do you even measure stiffness? How do you measure stiffness of the tendon? So it's like, and most of those studies, I think they're doing it on a strength training exercise, get on like an isometric and do like a maximal isometric contraction. And then you can put an ultrasound on the tendon, look at the ends and see how much it deforms. Like if it deforms a bunch pre-study and then it deforms a little bit less post-study, you'd say it's a stiffer tendon because it's deforming less based on the load you're putting on it. And I would just think if you're doing strength training for the study and then your test is a strength training thing, obviously it's going to look good because it's just a skill. Yeah. I would think it's just a skill component.
Thing.
Yeah. And I think they only have done one study on a jumping where they actually did an ultrasound of the tendon to see how much it deformed on like a plyometric thing. I think the problem when you compare it to plyometrics is the studies suck. They're short-term plyometric studies. And like, I bet you plyometrics in a lab are nothing like plyometrics we're doing with good athletes. Yeah. And
you're not going to get Ja Morant in a study. That's too busy.
Yeah. And so I've just kind of went back to like, then you got studies on two big studies on badminton players, lifetime badminton players, and their lead leg is like 1.25 times stiffer than their back leg. And then you got research on badminton players, same thing. The leg that they step out with and have to stop, which is really high patellar tendon load. Both those cases, it's like 1.25 times bigger tendon and 1.25 times stiffer tendon. Again, you're testing stiffness in whatever way, but you're comparing it side to side. You're seeing that thing. So I'm like, and then you just look at how stupid a tendon is. All it knows is strain. It's just getting pulled on. Like all it is getting pulled on. So when you're playing badminton and they get that lead leg, you're getting like thousands of reps of lead leg strain at a high level. When you get in the weight room, it's kind of hard to get a bunch of strain because your muscles fatigue out faster. You know, you get tired faster. How many reps of a super heavy squat can you manage? A 90% squat can you manage? Like 10 reps in a session or like 20 reps maybe. If you go play badminton, you just stressed your tendon 1,000 more times than the volume you did in the weight room. And I think tendons only respond to the number of repeated flexions, like getting pulled on. I think it's all I respond to is how many times did I get pulled on to a certain strain. So I'm like, whatever the thing you want to do, if you want to play basketball, go play basketball your entire life, and you're going to be stressing your tendon like crazy, assuming you don't run into tendon pain. And that's going to make your tendon super stiff, way better than any, I think, lifting intervention could have done. But again, lifting will add to that because all it is adding more layers of, I guess, pulls on your tendon.
Building the chassis. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I do think, too, the plyometric impact is that it's getting your muscle to coordinate with your tendon. And I think that's like if you look at the GTOs, the Golgi tendon organs, like the little bit of innervation you get with the tendon, that's in the muscle tendon unit. That's not so much in the mid tendon or the tendon bone junction. So it's like all of that coordination aspect is happening at the muscle tendon unit. And then I think the further you get to the bone, that's just like a dumb piece of meat that is not really just, it's just getting yanked or it's not getting yanked. Like it doesn't really have much say. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it. I think it's just how much volume. I think it's just lifetime volume of really high tendon pulling. And you get really high tendon pulling for a high volume if you pick a sport and you play that sport for your whole life.
Yeah,
Whether it's basketball, volleyball, something like that. You're going to get way more volume of tendon pulling there than you will with heavy squats.
Yeah, I've heard you also recently highlighting the importance, or there's like two things, and I think they overlap. Correct me if they don't overlap at all, but metabolic health for overall tendon health, and then also the circadian rhythm, because I feel like a lot of your routines are also correlated with your metabolic health and stuff like that. So I guess for just general, if you're just trying to be athletic and you want your tendons to be as high performing as possible, we need to stay athletic and we need to be doing sport for as long as possible and stay as engaged with it as we possibly can. How much emphasis do you put on metabolic health for youth athletes where, you know, their diet and their sleep can be all over the place, but then they're probably a bit more resilient, but then also my crowd of people trying to get more athletic in their 30s? Does it change your recommendations, or is there just broad recommendations for
I think
don't be a fucking slob?
Well, I guess nowadays you do get kids who are morbidly obese, which is crazy, but for the most part, kids are pretty healthy metabolically. So I'm like, and even just obesity is one aspect of metabolism. You can get like cholesterol levels that are messed up, or like blood pressure can be bad. Blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, three probably big ones. They're probably more. Not a metabolism expert, but those are the ones that really impact the tendons. And I just think when you get older, you're more prone for those issues. You're more prone to run into those things. If you're a young kid, just be active, just be active. Don't play video games all day, and your metabolism is probably going to be fine. That's because I don't know too many morbidly obese kids. So like my families are pretty active
DMs
for the most part. Yeah. But
they're getting like wrist bursitis, not jumper's knee. Like just video gaming.
Yeah. So I think it's just something that creeps up on you with age, that like you gotta get those things down. And if you don't get them down, your tendon health is just going to be harder to manage, because the blood circulating in your body is not healthy. And the tissues that don't receive much blood flow, like a tendon, are more prone for those problems. I think you see it like, what do you see it with? The kidneys, right? The feet with diabetics, the eyes. There's a lot of type 2 diabetes in my family. So like my uncle has really bad eyesight, doesn't manage his diabetes well. My grandpa had like feet problems. I think it's the areas where like is it that you don't have as much blood flow or bad exchange or something like that? They're more prone. So I think a tendon is one where it doesn't get much exchange. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. The advanced glycation end products, like the sugar, you get crosslinks within your tendon collagen, but they can become sugar crosslinks, which I think would just happen from chronically elevated blood sugar. So the advanced glycation end products.
Oh, really?
And
it's not, because it's collagen normally. And sometimes it can be like sugar.
Collagen, like if you think of patellar tendon, the collagen's pretty much all running linear, but the collagen is so short. Like collagen's tiny anyways as it is, but it's such a short triple helix that it has to cross-link to one another to be strong. Because the one collagen triple helix is not running from your muscle all the way to your bone. They're little guys, and for them to actually have any integrity, they have to be cross-linked. So they usually get cross-linked normally by just being normal. But as you get older, you accumulate advanced glycation end products as your blood sugar gets elevated chronically, and those cross-links can become they say sugar cross-links, which are more brittle. So then your tendon would be more brittle, and your tendon would be more likely to I don't know if your tendon would probably be more likely to rupture. They've speculated that in the NFL, when they had the lockout and many guys were off for a long period of time, and then they came back and they saw like a crazy amount of Achilles ruptures because guys had so much time off and they just went right into football. That was one of the speculations, is like, was their metabolism worse because they were sedentary? I mean, that could be a massive speculation, but it's like,
because it wasn't just time off sport. It's like the whole fucking world was shut down. So I'm sure a lot of these guys have gyms in their houses, but there was.
This was a different case. This was like an NFL lockdown where like they cut the season for some reason at the beginning of the season. So like the guys
not COVID shutdown.
It wasn't COVID. No, it was prior. Like maybe 2011 or I don't remember, but I think that was one of the speculations. You probably got that speculation with like COVID too. How like if you took significant time off. The thing is, I don't know how long it takes for the sugar crosslinks to come in. Is that like many months and years, or is that like, can that happen if you're just super sedentary for a very short period of time? I just don't know. But that's just something that does accumulate over time. I'm thinking if you're like 30, you probably are not getting too much of that. But as you get like 50, 60, 70, like you're getting a lot of those problems, the metabolic problems within your tendons. And the circadian rhythm is another one that just naturally goes away with age. Like I'd speak about the building phase and the cleanup phase of the tendon based on the circadian rhythm. And it's like a really robust yin and yang. But as you get older, the amplitude decreases, so it's not a robust yin and yang anymore. And it also
it doesn't clean out as hard. There's residual buildup from the previous day.
Yeah, it just takes longer. It just takes longer to and if you think of the amplitude as being like a big amplitude, as you get older, it just gets smaller and smaller. So like the effect of the building and the cleanup is less. And also, if we have around like a 24-hour circadian rhythm, it extends with age. So it's like now it's 27 hours maybe. So it's like, you're losing like 3 hours of whatever you used to get when you're a kid, that it's just everything, all the processes are just going to take longer. So those are things that are just like kind of unavoidable, I guess. I guess you could kind of try to optimize your circadian health by doing listening to a Huberman podcast or something, get sunlight. And I mean, but the thing is, the thing is, it's not even sunlight for the peripheral tissues. This is kind of debated, but it's not even the sunlight that is signaling the circadian rhythm of your tendon. It's your exercise levels and your feeding. So if it's daytime, you're moving. So your tendon is now getting active, and you're eating. So your tendon is getting the signal that it's like, now it's daytime. And then when you go to bed, you stop moving and you stop eating. So I think the issues you get with your tendon is you're going to go do a workout at 2 a.m. and you never do a workout then. And you're going to eat a huge meal at 3 a.m. and you never eat a huge meal at 3 a.m. Like just really messing with the circadian in that fashion. I wonder with like pro athletes how like if they want to stay out late and go to clubbing and whatever, and like they're moving super late at night and then they're eating food or drinking alcohol, and like that probably has a negative impact on their circadian the circadian rhythm of their tendon. The other thing with the circadian, just going to keep going further on the circadian, is they back in the day, Katia Hennemeyer did a study on when they did atomic bombs. They could see there was this level, it was called C14 in the atmosphere. So you could see they did atomic bombs and then they stopped testing them. So she looked at skeletal muscle and she saw that based on the environment, people had like equal amounts of C14 in their tissue because the skeletal muscle was turning over all the time. Versus a tendon, if you were born at the period of super high, if you were born when they were testing atomic bombs and you were 20 years old and now you're 60 years old, you're going to have the same level of C14 in your tendon as that time because your tendon hasn't turned over at all. So that was her research.
Wow. So Oppenheimer gave a bunch of people jumpers there.
So anyways, this goes deeper with her study, which was I don't know when that study was, in the 2010 or 2000s. It basically said the tendons are not turning over. The core of the tendons don't turn over past puberty. Then they kind of made that number to around like 3 to 5% because they did some research on like this, what they call the sacrificial pool of collagen. Some of your collagen actually turns over every single day with your circadian rhythm. So that's your circadian rhythm of your tendon, is this small pool of collagen, like 3 to 5%. It's getting damaged every day and then it's building up every day. And the idea is that is protecting those structures that you built from 0 to 17 that are kind of static. They're kind of just stuck there for the rest of your life. Then the thing is, when you get tendinopathy, she did a study on tendinopathy and she saw that instead of 95% of the tendon being static, it was more like 50% of the tendon was static. And the other 50% was now active. So it's like if you take someone and you overload their tendon and they accumulate tendinopathy, now the entire tendon becomes super active. And that little bit, that 3 to 5% of circadian tissue is now 50% circadian tissues because it's turning over all the time, probably because you damaged it. They recently did a study on Achilles ruptures too, where they took like 20 or so people with Achilles ruptures and they took a biopsy where it ruptured and they took a biopsy a few centimeters or a distance above to kind of get a control tissue. And they saw that both of those areas, based on that C14 data, they had about 50% new collagen that they should have had from like the C14 time. So it's basically, in my head, I'm like, a healthy tendon, if you take a healthy tendon, because those people she first imaged, which were like, you take the person that the C14 was, or the atomic bombs are happening at 20, they imaged them at 60. the whole tendon was the same as it was back then. That's a healthy tendon. That's a healthy person. The core of the Achilles tendon was completely healthy. But if someone has tendinopathy, the whole thing is like 50% of it is now active. And someone who goes on to rupture their tendon, they're in the same camp. 50% of their tendon was already working. So I'm looking at it of like, and this was pre tendinopathy and pre-rupture. This is like the iceberg effect, how like at the top of the iceberg, you have tendon rupture or tendon pain. At the very bottom, you have like overload or training errors. And then kind of in the middle, still under the surface, is the tendon is turning over like crazy. The tendon is like revamping its building process because you've done too much. And you might go on to get tendon pain. You might go on to rupture. A lot of people don't, so you're fine. But I think it's just a natural thing of you're overloading your tendons for your life, and they just have to get more active. The interesting thing, I think, is the tendons are so strong, and I think why they're so strong is partly because they get no blood flow, and they can exist in like these hypoxic states. And now you've overloaded the thing, and it's getting a ton of blood flow, a ton more blood flow, and it's functioning with more oxygen. So I'm like, is it now weaker? Is the tendon that is, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like,
it's like this midway construction site that you've,
yeah. So I'm like, it's turning over too much almost to where, because that was one of the ideas when they had that concept of the tendon doesn't turn over much in after adolescence. And the idea was if it is turning over a bunch, it's going to be weaker. It has to be weaker because it's degrading a bunch of the collagen every single day. And now you have a tendon that is only like 50% of the collagen is intact and the other 50% is damaged and getting cleaned up. So it's like, it's just a big speculation, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it of like, could this be something for the future of someone that, as we think they're at risk of tendinopathy or they're at risk for rupture, and we could just look at the activity of their tendon and say, your tendon is way too active. Like, we need to either offload you or do some training interventions or maybe do some injection therapy. I don't know what it would be to try to get this thing back under control so that you have more of the intact collagen that is not consistently recycling itself. Because the more you recycle, the weaker that thing, like in theory, would be. It's really fascinating stuff. And I'm just like putting all those pieces together to be like, painting this picture in my head of like, is this what's going on in tendinopathy and tendon rupture? And I think it's that you've done the training errors, you've done way too much, maybe for way too long, or you've done too much too soon, and you don't even know it yet. You never know it until you get tendinopathy or you get a tendon rupture, but you probably could have looked months prior and you'd have been like, oh, there's all the problems I was having. You know,
I'm creating an environment of risk factors for this to emerge.
Yeah, that was there for years prior. Like, no wonder I got tendinopathy. There's a horse tendon.
Is injury prevention? I'm coming back to being fucking an injury prevention guy.
That could be the thing. Exactly.
No, because you'd never be able to measure it, but just start worrying about these things before you have a tendinopathy, especially with athletic populations, because it is pretty common for athletic people to experience some bout of this at some point. Is that where we're
sort
hard
of to say? It's so hard to say because we're also doing like it's like reverse survivorship bias, because these are people that did not survive. You know, they went to get a rupture or tendinopathy. The classic
pitfall of injury prevention. Injury prevention.
So I'm like, what about the other 99% that had a 50-50 active static tendon that never got tendinopathy, never went to rupture? There was a guy, Tom Ivers. He was a horse tendon researcher, and like a lot of our understanding of tendons come from horses because like they're the closest to us with their tendons, closest animal to us with their tendons. He would get he had a YouTube video. He has many YouTube videos. He died, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I read his book. It was called The Bowed Tendon, which basically means just a ruptured tendon. It was one of the best tendon books I've ever read. And it was all on horse tendons. It was so entertaining to read. And like any strength coach that would want to read that thing, it would just line up with all of your frustrations with people getting injured and sport coaches doing dumb things and everything. Like it's the exact same stories, but he would get people on calls and he was like, they would go because their horse would have a bowed tendon, a ruptured tendon. And they would be explaining the training history and everything. And he would be like, okay, they would say something like, yeah, we did this amount of kilometers running this day, like kind of out of nowhere, did way too much. And he'd be like, yep, that's where you ruptured the tendon. They'd be like, no, they didn't rupture it till 3 days later. And he's like, nope, they ruptured it that day. Like he could predict, he knew exactly when they ruptured the tendon, and he was right in this one case, at least. That is when it ruptured. It's just that the horse still went out and like performed. It just then was like, had a limp, or it got lame, you know, it's like still able to move a bit. Maybe it wasn't a complete rupture. Sometimes you get partial, but he could pick out like just based off of the spike in training load or something, that the horse would then rupture their tendon right there. So I'm like, could this be something? It's hard. It's so easy with horses because they can't tell you, they just do what you need them to do. But then you go humans and you got the brain and you got all the other factors. But I'm like,
They start yapping.
we need a Tom Ivers. We need a Tom Ivers in the Achilles tendon world to be like, yep, that athlete's going to rupture the tendon today. We need that.
I was thinking about going the other way. I've been fascinated recently with animal chiropractors. Like, I just love watching a variety of animals. I don't like the dogs because the dogs and the cats really seem scared, but I was watching this guy do spinal manipulations on like an anaconda. I'm like, yeah, fucking hell yeah. Do you ever see yourself just getting so frustrated with humans? You're like, I'm just going to go look after horses. Like, there could be a lot of money in that.
There's someone that actually massages horses and shit, and you can see the pain relief. It's pretty funny. Yeah.
The things they used to do to horse tendons were like barbaric. They would put like hot metal rods on them, like sear them, burn them. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they were thinking. And then I can't remember the other ones, but some of the things they would do, and they would just load them with injectables. They would just inject like PRP, all these things into their tendons just to try to get them better.
So I shouldn't laugh. This is very cruel.
But you look at the things, it was really hard for them to come back from a rupture. Like, I don't think many of them would. Maybe it had to be a partial rupture. But look at their rehab, and their rehab is just graded exposure. It's like, take a whole week of just like standing in your stall, don't let them move. And then, or maybe 2 weeks. And then it's like, now we're going to start walking a little bit each day. Then you're going to start trotting. Then you start getting into sprinting. And then you start getting it, and it's just graded exposure over the days. And they would image them though with like a UTC scan. I don't know how often, pretty often, to see how the tendon is responding. I know there's some pro organizations doing that now, looking at how the tendons respond like weekly or maybe every month with pro athletes. And that's some really interesting stuff. The thing is, it's just always confidential and no one's really I don't know who's ever going to bring that out and start presenting it. But based on the loads, like I have that toast analogy, like it's pretty easy to toast your tendon in one day. You or like burn the toast in one day. And the thing is though, you just give it 2-3 days and it just usually recovers its normal structure and you're good to go again. The thing is just like, we need to take people, overload them day one. They toasted the thing, overload them again, overload them again, overload them again. Like, and let's just see how that tendon looks. It's just what human is going to go under that thing and be like, we're going to try to rupture your tendon. Let's see how this goes,
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to pivot out of more the tendon stuff. And, I've seen on the VJP page that you've been posting a lot about short and long penultimate. And, I've recently got my first dunk, not in game, but that's the plan from now. Just wanted to know like your thoughts on, trying to change up the strategy when it comes to trying out short, trying out long. Is it worth it? Or have you played around with athletes penultimates at all, or you just sort of let them go?
No, because I hate coaching. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate coaching people.
Yeah.
I kind of realized that recently. I'm just like, I've never really cared much for it. I'm such a hands-off guy. Like,
yeah,
I think I got that from my grandpa was like that with my dad, and my dad was like that with me. It's just like, all right, we're gonna do this, follow along. Like, there was no hand holding, there was no nothing. It's just like, I'm not teaching you anything, just learn from watching, and I've just taken that. So like the really intricate stuff, I've never really been like. Anyways, the penultimate thing, I'm like, I think it's just that ISA thing. The narrow guys are gonna have long, the wide guys are gonna have short, and I'm a wide guy, and I naturally love short. My left one will get a little bit long. But I think my left one gets long because I can never carry speed going into my left. I can't carry any speed going into a left penultimate. I can carry speed going into a right.
Momentum builder.
Yeah, and that's the way I look at penultimate too. It's just like, it's just going to sort itself out. It's like, if you have a bunch of speed, you don't need a long penultimate. If you have no speed, you probably need a long penultimate. And then also is like, what can you deal with? Because I think a lot of people that have short ones who are don't have a decade of jumping in their back pocket, they're going to have a short penultimate because they're I mean, let's just say the whole legs. The legs don't want to deal with a long penultimate with a lot of speed. That's super stressful on that one leg. So it's like they just shorten it and make you hop and land with two legs. And that's just 50-50 load instead of like putting it all on one side and then the other one has to come crashing in. So I'm like, if someone wants to jump technique, like just go dunk for 10 years and your dunk technique will take care of itself. You don't need to do anything else.
It's funny how you said,
They want
it's funny how you said the jumper's knee thing. I I actually find myself shortening my penultimate when it started tweaking, when I sort of gave myself that deadline that I said,
That's what I think
within the
too.
month.
I wonder, obviously I'm going to nocebo people. I wonder how many jumpers knees have been created or been flared up by forcing a long penultimate. You know?
No, because
Yeah,
it makes
true.
sense, because you get these people to go against their body's intuition. It's like, no, create all this momentum. And all it leads to is then your body just trying to create a big braking force, which I realize a lot of that is just a natural part of trying to change that horizontal momentum into vertical momentum. But I think it's like most of it just becomes you just trying to slow yourself down. You still spend like 3/4 of a fucking second on the ground.
I know. And it's like, look at all these NFL guys. Well, not all of them, but like you get some of these guys that go and do like a dunk contest, like NFL or big football or whatever. They always got short penultimates. Those big wide dudes, short penultimates. And it's like I just have entered a field of narrow guys, because that's what dunkers are. Jumpers are narrow guys. They have a long penultimate. They have an archetype for the way to jump. And I'm like, I am not built like you, so I'm not going to jump your way, and everyone's going to have a problem with it. It's just, it used to frustrate me like back in the day, and now it's just comical because I'm so, that phrase that Nassim has, skin in the game. I have no skin in the game, like with penultimate or with vertical jump. I don't care anymore. Same with hypertrophy. With tendons, I have quite a bit of skin in the game, so things will actually irritate me. But I think as I reach maybe as I care less over time, I don't know. Like the people that have no skin in the game are often like the ones you can get such good wisdom from in a domain. You know, like they're so valuable, but we often look down on them. Yeah. I've gotten a lot of good insights from people that have zero skin in the game. Even for me, I give people advice on things I have no skin in the game, and I'm like, that might hit home with them that they could have never got from someone who's actually knowledgeable about the
thing. Oh, that's a good one. This has been a fucking phenomenal chat. I've learned a bunch. Thank you for giving up your time and helping educate us on rehab, tendons, and all that. Just a closing sort of question. And I guess there's two parts of it. I get consistently frustrated with like hypertrophy and just general S&C research because they just keep boring down some rabbit holes. I'm like, let's stop throwing research dollars at this. Like, I don't know if you followed the whole squats versus hip thrusts. And it's like, they're both fucking good. They're both fucking good. Like, stop. We're never going to nail down one as superior at a population fucking level. Are there any aspects of tendon research where you're like, stop looking down this rabbit hole, it's not going anywhere? And then the other side of the question is, what aspects of tendon research do you think we really need to be fleshed out further based on what you're sort of seeing?
Yeah, I think the whole like, oh man, that's a tough one, because I don't know what, there probably are ones that I read, I'm just like, yeah, obviously, you know, you read a study and it's like, did you really need to spend 6 months on that? You see that pretty often. It's probably the loading thing, I guess. You know, it's like arguing about is loading, like what's the best loading intervention, or is loading good, or do you need to do it, or can you just give it the course of time of rest or whatever? And for me, I'm just always like, I don't care, because the ones who come to me for the most part are athletes who want to go play some sport. You have to load your entire life. You have to stay strong. So I don't care if that's going to be the perfect thing for tendinopathy. That might be for like a glute tendon, like glute tendons are for like old ladies. Is loading the proper thing, or what do you know about glute tendon? I don't care about the glute tendon. Like, I don't care at all, because it's not my population. So the whole loading thing, like arguing if loading is necessary, or arguing if loading is like, what do they call the gold standard of rehab? I don't care. It's a gold standard for me. Like, we need to lift. We have to lift. You're an athlete. The one thing, what do I kind of want to look into more? Like, I'm trying to get a bunch of these people on my podcast, and they're all with different domains. One of them, there's two with the interfascicular matrix, the gel around the fascicles, which like lets the tendons slide and rotate internally, the collagen slide and rotate internally. So I want to talk to them. There needs to be more on the interfascicular matrix. Some on the circadian rhythm. Like there's one woman I want to get on, but she's like she's trying to do this pretty big study. I think it's called like Tendo Time. There's some pretty cool stuff happening about like when to exercise or how things impact the circadian rhythm. And then I really want to get down to like what's going on with tendon pain. what is tendon pain? You know, like that's such a, Ebony Rear had a study saying tendon pain is an enigma. And often like I enjoy leaving it at that, but sometimes it's just like, what is it? Like you get the nerves coming in and you get a cell reaction. And then sometimes it's the outer tendon sheath that just gets this sensation that it's getting bigger. And then the pain is from the outer tendon. Is it the area? And then you got the area of degeneration. If you have a hole of degeneration, the thought is that's not causing any pain because the cells have died, or a lot of the cells have died. It's like mechanically silent, quote unquote. And the pain you feel is the healthy tendon that's been overloaded. So it's not even the degeneration that's causing the pain; it's the healthy tendon that's been overloaded. So it's stuff like that. Where I'm like, yeah, I'm like, what is really going on with tendon pain? And always, it's about getting better results and getting a better outcome for people. And I'm like, I'm going to go down these rabbit holes. And 10 years from now, I might just get the same exact results with people, the same exact outcome. But I just get so bored with like I got bored with S&C. I get so bored. If I was to just keep rehabbing people's tendons the same exact way I do now, tell the same exact stories I do now, I would be so bored. So I'm going down the rabbit holes just to keep my own entertainment high. It's just, things just get so boring for me, you know? Hypertrophy, you're talking about the squat and the hip thrust thing? Dude, hypertrophy, I do not care one bit. I'm like, you want hypertrophy, run hypertrophy clusters. There's no more argument that needs to be had. Run the 8-week program. If you didn't get big enough, run it again. I don't care about optimize. I think hypertrophy optimizers are like one of the worst type of people. I do not care about optimizing.
That's the only thing you don't need to optimize for. It's like you see so many just fucking idiots get big.
Yeah.
And like, it's because they want to make it technical. And like the human need to try to gatekeep your position by making things unnecessarily technical. Like it's an urge inside every expert who's in any degree of a protected field. But
you got to get that content out somehow.
Because before you even fucking said it, I was like, I would love for Kasem to just soak this conversation up. Or, like I said, Kasem needs some fucking hypertrophy clusters. So do I. I'll throw my fucking hands up.
Yeah, me too.
I guess everyone does. Everyone does. Jake, thanks so much for your time today. Is there anything you got coming up that you'd like to let people know about? Or if you want to be followed, can you just let people know where they can keep up with your content?
Yeah, I'm going to Boyles. I'm going to hang out with Mike Boyle speaking at his seminar, and I gotta try to dumb down tendons for trainers. That's what it's gonna be. Tendons for trainers. Mike said something good. He was like, all these strength coaches are trying to go after other strength coaches, but you need to start going after personal trainers because the market is what, like 100x or whatever, 1000x, something like that. Yeah, it's like, why? So that was a good piece of wisdom from him. But anyways, I'm going to speak there. I'm about to head out to see Matt Watson, Tim Riley, whoever else is at that Austin Plyo seminar. I just want to see the boys, you know? And
I'm jealous. Whole day jumping around with the lads and talking shop.
Well, I'm not jumping. I haven't jumped for 10 months now. And I have this tube keeping my arm dry. So I'm like, I'm skipping the practical. I'm just going to watch. And then if you want to follow me, Jake Tuura, Tuura, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.